Hello, it's Tracy Kiernan from Step by Step Painting, and this acrylic painting tutorial will demonstrate to you how to paint Lover's Cove. So this particular painting can be done as a single design, so you can paint this on one canvas, or you and a partner can paint this on two different canvases. So the design can be split in half down the middle where the heart is. And I would recommend two 9x12 canvases. So the 9x12 is a small, easy to work on size, especially if you're doing this at home. So you each paint one side of the painting. Or you can do this on one large canvas. So the 12x16 is the size I will be demonstrating on. There are 8 colors in this painting. I'm using Liquitex Basics, Titanium White, Cad Red Light Hue. If you don't have Cad Red Light Hue, you can use any orange color. Phthalo Blue, you can use any blue color if you don't have that one. Deep Violet, same with this one. Any of these colors could be subbed out for whatever color you have close to it available. Mars Black, Light Pink, and Primary Yellow. You'll also need Raw Sienna or any kind of light brown color. And for brushes, there are 3 brushes for this. One is an optional brush. So this is a 3-0 little detail brush that I used for some of the detail, especially like in the little cattail plants at the bottom. But you don't have to use that one if you don't have a tiny detail brush. I also found it helpful to use a toothpick for some of the sparkles in the water. So also optional. But the main brushes are a 3/4 flat brush and a number 4 round brush. So those are the brushes I use for the majority of the painting. So if you have those exact ones, that's fine. If you have something similar, that's okay too. A piece of chalk. So the chalk is helpful for drawing the rock formation. And we are going to go ahead and get started. So this is a 12x16 canvas. I have it placed horizontally, and I'm going to load my palette with the color Cad Red Light Hue, and Primary Yellow. We'll also need some Titanium White. So we are going to start by painting the sunset. And before we start painting this sunset, let's figure out where our horizon line is. So the horizon line is basically where the sky is going to stop and where the water is going to start. So let's do this. This one is not exactly in the center of the painting. We have a little bit more sky than water in this one. So this one is 7 inches. So if you're working onto 9x12s, it should be the same because it's 12 inches high for this one. But if you're doing, so 7 inches, same thing for the 9x12. But if you're doing a different size canvas, just kind of estimate you want a little bit more sky. So it's almost center, but not quite. So a little bit more sky than the water. And just do a horizontal line all the way across. And so now we have this divided up. So everything above the sky is going to be, or everything above that line is going to be the sunset. And everything under that line is going to be the water. Just double checking my measurements. And we're going to go ahead and get started. So we're going to use our 3/4 flat brush for a while now. We're going to use that for painting the sky. And that's that big flat brush. If your brush is not 3/4 inches, if it's 1 inch, that's fine. So we are going to start by loading this brush in the water, kind of tap it dry, and just the orange. I'm going to call this orange from now on instead of Cad Red Light Hue, just to call it a shorter word. And we're going to go left and right all the way across at the top of the canvas. So I am just using the full width of the brush to paint a relatively thin layer of this, although it is covering the canvas, so I don't have any white parts of the canvas still showing through. I'm going to go down about 3 or 4 inches, so maybe about a third of the way down the sky, and then wipe a little bit of that orange off the brush and grab your yellow. So when I blend colors together, I like to start below the color. So see how I applied that yellow below that orange? and then you want to bring it up into the orange and work the transition zone. So that transition zone is where that orange is turning into the yellow, or kind of a lighter orange at this point, because the yellow is mixing with that color. And you want to just kind of brush over that part where those two colors meet. So brush over it several times, and that is going to wet on wet blend on the canvas. So your two colors are going to blend together. And it's a sky, it's a sunset. It's okay to have streaks of color in the sky. So we don't need to blend this perfectly. But we do want to get it to blend so it doesn't look like a color block. It looks more like a gradient. So I'm taking this and blending it up into the sky. I will say, if you're doing this on two different canvases, you're both pretty much doing the same thing right now. You're painting the same sunset. If you want to make sure your sunsets are meeting together, you can kind of put your canvases together and make sure the colors kind of continue on, but you don't have to have them side by side. It's okay if both of yours look slightly different from each other. I'm going to go down to a little bit more than halfway, and then I am actually going to get a towel here and wipe my brush off. I'm not going to rinse, but I'm going to wipe to make sure there's not too much paint on my brush at this point. And I'm going to introduce titanium white. So this is going to be kind of the same thing. I'm going to take my white and apply it below my yellow, and then work the transition zone and bring it up into the yellow. This works best when this paint hasn't dried yet. So you want to kind of work a little bit fast here to make sure your paint doesn't dry. You can also utilize a little bit of water on your brush. So if you notice it's starting to dry out, you can dip your brush in just a little bit of that paint water. I'm going to get some more of the yellow, the primary yellow on my palette. I'm actually going to go back and add a little bit more yellow to this. So this is kind of like white and yellow at this point, and it should turn a very pretty bright yellow glow. If you're doing this on two canvases, you're doing the same thing on both sides. Taking this, bring it all the way across, blend it up into your orange. So we want to create a really bright white yellow glow right above the horizon line. That's the brightest part of our sunset. That's where that sun is going down under the horizon line. So this needs to be very bright. So when you do your white, you want it to be brighter right there above that line. Just be careful with that pencil line, that sometimes the pencil tends to kind of like get kind of messy in the paint. So we don't want to smear that pencil too much. And bring this up into the sky. And just blending that color. Again, it's okay to have streaks of dark where it's supposed to be light, streaks of light where it's supposed to be dark. It does not have to be a perfect gradient. I am smoothing my brush strokes out, so I don't want to see those brush strokes. I'm just taking my brush and just making sure it goes all the way across and it smooths out. A little bit of white right here on the bottom, just above the horizon line. So our sky is darker at top and lighter at the bottom. So it's important not to over blend your colors. So if you keep brushing over this, it might end up all turning the same color. You want to at some point just kind of let it be. So there's our sky. And if you're working on two canvases, both of your canvases look relatively the same at this point. And let's go ahead and rinse and let's paint the water. So this is the first layer of the water, and we're going to use Phthalo Blue. We're also going to put a little bit of black on our palette as well, because we're going to kind of mix a dark, kind of a dark navy blue with that black. I'm actually going to get my brush all rinsed off and introduce some black to my palette. And if you need some more white on your palette, we'll also be using white. So let's start by mixing blue with a little bit of black. You want maybe 2 parts blue to 1 part black, or maybe 3 parts blue to 1 part black, and just a teeny tiny bit of white in there. It's going to make this dark grayish blue color. So we're going to take this dark grayish blue color and start at the bottom. If you're working with your partner, you'll notice that maybe you mix your colors differently, or maybe you're sharing the same palette, so that helps you have the same color. But if you're using your own palette, you may notice you mix your colors differently and you have two different styles, and that is okay. It does not have to look exactly the same. So I'm going to take this dark grayish blue color, go at the bottom, do left and right paint strokes going all the way across. So we're kind of doing an opposite thing here where we're starting on the bottom instead of at the top, and we're starting dark and then we're working light. So it's opposite from the sky. So basically what's happening is we are going to start allowing this water, so it's nice and dark at the bottom, we're going to allow it to start getting lighter as we work our way up towards our horizon line. So the next color we're going to blend here is the Phthalo Blue without any of that black mix into it. So this is more of a pure Phthalo Blue. It's going to look very similar to that darker color, and that's okay. And we're going to go up a little more than halfway and then grab a big chunk of that titanium white. We want to do this before that blue dries so we can blend it. Take that white, apply it above your blue, and then blend it down into the blue. So we have our dark color at the bottom and it's starting to get light. That white will make a really pretty kind of medium blue color. Go up, but don't go up all the way. We still want to get this water to be a little bit more lighter as we get to our horizon line. So if you need to wipe the brush off because there's too much blue or maybe the black is interfering with it, you can, or you can even rinse the brush off if that makes more sense to you. We want to keep going. I'm going to get some more white on my palette. So take this and add more titanium white to the area above this. So I want to fill in the rest of the water with this. You might notice that when you get closer to the horizon line, you'll need to use more of the end of the bristles. So you're going to hold it kind of horizontally so you can do smaller paint strokes in there instead of using the full width of the brush. So it's going to turn a light blue color. And you're basically going to fill the rest of the canvas with this color and blend it down. It's okay to take that white and kind of blend it down into your darker area. However, you don't want it to get too light towards the bottom and you don't want to over blend it. We still want a pretty gradient of light at the top and dark at the bottom. If you need to go back and add darker at the bottom, you can. Now it's time to let this dry before going on to the next step. The next step is going to involve using a piece of chalk to draw our rock formation in our tree. So this is where our painting gets divided in half. So if you're working on this single design, you just basically copy what I'm doing. If you're each working on a different canvas, you would be doing the right side and your partner would be doing the left side, or vice versa. So right down the middle, there is a heart. So both of you are drawing a heart that meets in the center. So that is the opening of our rock cave heart formation. So it's right there above your horizon line, relatively large size heart. You can change the size of it if you want it to be bigger or smaller. And then you're just going to start sketching the rock. Kind of goes around. So over here on the left, I'm just drawing kind of a wavy line that goes up. I'm going to make my cave asymmetrical. So if you want yours to both look kind of symmetrical, you can. This is going to be, it's going to look different on each side. There's going to be like little bumps over here on the right. It's down, kind of like a peninsula almost. And then notice the bottom. So the bottom of the rock formation actually goes under the horizon line, maybe like a 1/4 inch below the horizon line. So it's not right there on the horizon line, it's down. So there's a little bit of water behind it. So that's kind of important for this design. And what's also important is there's like at least 2 inches of a gap on the left and the right of your rock to leave enough room for trees. So I'm going to do 2 different trees on each side. So this tree is going to be starting at the bottom. It's going to be a large tree with many branches. And the tree, there's going to be another tree in the upper right that doesn't start at the bottom. It's just kind of hanging down from the corner. So if you want to change the tree design on this, you can. I'm just going to kind of sketch this out with chalk. So I have my composition all drawn out to make sure that the tree is not covering my rock formation. It kind of hugs it, so it kind of curves and goes around it. There's 2 main sort of branches, and then branches that kind of stem out from that. And the trunk is very wide at the bottom. And then the tree branch over here on the right side is going to start in the upper right corner, and this one is just kind of hanging down. So I'm going to take my chalk and start drawing my main branch, the corner. So there's the opening of the trunk. It starts out wide and then it goes narrow, and it's going to split off into 2 main branches. And then I can, from those main branches, I can draw more just kind of single line branches. So these are going to have flowers kind of dangling from them. So you want to kind of position it so it's not really covering your rock formation. And again, you both can change, you're doing this on 2 canvases, you can change the trees, you can both have a tree at the bottom if you want to do it that way. So you can kind of get creative with it. So once we have our composition kind of all drawn out, keep in mind this chalk does erase, so it's not like this is what it has to be. We can adjust this as we're painting it in. I always end up adjusting my chalk drawings as I'm painting it in. I use it more of a guideline than a coloring book. So let's load our palette with Mars Black. We are going to paint our trees and our rock solid coat of black first, and then we're going to add some highlighting on top of it. So let's start by using a number 4 round brush, and I'm going to paint the rock formation first. So this is number 4 round and the color Mars Black. Added a little bit of water to that brush and kind of distributed that water into that black. Basically kind of watered down that black a little bit. Liquitex Basics paint tends to be kind of thick, especially if we're doing like a solid color of something and we just want to paint the first coat. It's okay to kind of thin that paint down a little bit. If you're working with craft paints, however, you don't really have to add water into craft paints because generally craft paints are already kind of watered down and flow super easy. So I'm going to just start painting my rock in. I'm going to just start around the heart because that's where I started my drawing at. I'm going to paint that negative space around the heart. Make sure that shape is all defined. So you and your partner would be both doing the same thing and just kind of making sure your rock meets in the middle. And I'm just I'm going to take this and kind of go around, outline the shape of the rock formation. Keep in mind that the bottom of this rock is below the horizon line, so we want to make sure that we paint this black part. The base of this needs to go, it will overlap part of the water. So I like to just kind of outline the shape first, and then just kind of fill it in and have my paint strokes kind of curve and go in the direction of the shape. It's okay to load your brush in a little bit of water to help kind of loosen that black up a little bit. And so the bottom of the rock formation does not have to be perfectly flat. In fact, it would make sense if it was maybe a little bit wavy at the bottom. And then later on, we'll paint some waves that kind of splash up on the rock and maybe kind of cover that bottom anyway. But right now, it's just really simple, covering up all of that shape and really just kind of defining your rock formation. So then let's go ahead and paint the trees next. So same exact thing, we are painting them a solid coat of Mars Black first, and then we're going to be adding lighter colors for the texture and highlight above it. So I'm using the same brush, the number 4 round brush. If you want to switch to a bigger brush or a bigger round brush that you have available, you are definitely welcome to do that. I like to kind of make the edges of my trees a little bit wavy. I'm going to take a branch and kind of extend that out, even though I didn't draw that with chalk. So you can definitely adjust your tree different from what your chalk drawing looks like. A little bit of water on the brush to kind of let that flow, but look at the edges. It kind of make the edges a little bit wavy, gives it a little bit of texture, gives it more of a realistic effect when you do that. And look how narrow this gets. So our trunk started out very wide at the bottom, and we want to allow this to get very narrow towards the top. And then it just kind of goes off the edge of the canvas. It also helps to twist your brush when you load it, especially when you know you're going to do these smaller pieces. So that lets you kind of distribute the paint more towards the end tip of the bristles. So very, very light pressure for these smaller brushes. That's how you get your thin line. You don't press hard on the brush at all. You press very lightly, and you're using mostly the very, very end tip of the brush. So right here, very thin. If it helps, you can use that tiny detail brush if you have one to do some of these smaller branches. So each branch kind of starts out thick, and then you release the pressure of the brush, and that allows your branch to get thinner. So thick, thin. So this one kind of curved upwards. There's like a curve where that branch opening part is. So right here, it's kind of curved. You don't need to do too many branches. We are going to be adding a lot of blossoms to this tree, blossoms that might end up covering these branches anyway, so I'm just going to paint the main branches of it. And do one more over here that kind of goes up, very thin branch. And then maybe one that kind of goes down very thinly. So you're just using the very, very edge of that brush to get that kind of thin line on there. So our tree in the upper right, same thing. You want to make sure it starts out thick, where that branch piece starts in the upper right corner, and then it gets thinner and then just kind of disappears and goes to a point. You want to kind of make the end or the shape of the branch, the edge of it, kind of wavy, gives it more of that natural look. And then this piece can kind of go down. Remember, it helps to kind of twist the brush when you're loading it. That gets that paint right there on the end, and just very light pressure for the ends of those branches. Just use the very tip of that brush to get that branch to go thin. Next, we are going to start highlighting our rock and our trees. So we are going to need the color Raw Sienna, which is a light brown. And it is okay if the rock is not dry all the way. If there's still wet black on it, that's okay. We don't even need to rinse our brush. Let's kind of wipe the brush off and grab our brown. So we want to start taking this brown. It should show up. So if you're doing this and it's like just mixing with the black, then you might want to let it dry just a little bit so this can work better. But basically, I'm just taking this brown, and I'm just sort of highlighting my rock. We want to make sure our paint strokes are still kind of going in the direction of the shape. So if we have a curve that goes around the outer part of the heart, we want to make sure that we're doing these sort of like short, curvy, choppy strokes that go around that shape. And then where there's like bumps on the rock, same thing. They're just kind of curving in the direction, giving it a little bit of texture by doing these curvy sort of choppy strokes. So yes, we do want that light brown to blend with the black, but it shouldn't be blending too much. It should still be showing up enough to where we can see that the rock is now turning into more of like a brownish color. But we don't want to also cover up a lot of the black. So that black is going to be used as the shadow part of this rock. And there's a lot of shadow because it's a sunset picture. It's kind of one or two steps up from being a solid black silhouette. Right here on the edges. We will be using white as well to help lighten some of this color. So mostly just the edges, little curvy strokes. So down here, maybe it's a little bit more flat, but maybe also still kind of bumpy, curvy texture. And let's try the white. I'm going to dip my brush in a little bit of white without rinsing it off. So now I have kind of a gray color. I'm just going to go in there and maybe add some of this gray color into the rock. So maybe over here on the edge of the opening, it might be kind of brighter because our sun is shining through. And then same right here. It's a little gray, sort of curvy paint strokes. Short, curvy paint strokes that go in the direction. So these are just kind of going around the heart and just blending with that color. So on these sort of bumpy parts, we can do gray and, gray and brown. So kind of like a light grayish brown color. Little short, choppy strokes to give it that texture, but still allowing a lot of that first black layer to be visible. You want to just keep layering your lighter colors on. It's a little bit of light right there on the edge, kind of blend it in, but try not to over blend the color. Little short paint strokes. Keep in mind, we don't want to cover up all of the black. So keep applying that lighter color. Have a nice variety of areas that are kind of light and areas that are darker, curvy strokes. Maybe there's a little bit of lightness over here. Kind of blend that in without trying to over blend it. Maybe there's a little bit more lightness right here on the edge of our heart. So we can just get this lighter gray color just on the inside. We don't have to outline the whole thing. So maybe just right here, some of that light is kind of going through. So the technique of adding the highlighting to the tree is basically the same. So same brush, same color. Let's just start with the raw sienna color. But this time we're having our paint strokes kind of flow and go in the direction of the branches. So they're kind of curving. Sometimes I like to kind of like wiggle my brush a little bit. So it gives you that kind of like wavy look instead of just straight. So kind of wavy paint strokes. You can also add a little bit of titanium white to your brush to create the highlight. So little wavy strokes going in the direction of the branches. We want to leave a lot of that black from that first layer still showing through. And that's how you create that texture on your tree. So you're just layering on your brown and your white. And if that black is still kind of blending below it, that's fine. If that black is completely dry and you want to add a little bit of black to your brush to kind of make sure that the color isn't too bright, you can do it that way. I'm going to rinse my brush off here to kind of start it over and use just titanium white. So I'm going to actually add little bits of just some bright white color along the edges of the tree branches. Twist my brush and just little pops of titanium white right on the edge. Of course, this is blending with it, just a little bit of lightness where that sun would be kind of hitting that right side of the tree. And we're going to do the same thing to our tree on the right. So using the light brown color and just very loose paint strokes, a little bit of white right on the edges, but not trying to cover up all the black, just very gently sort of highlighting your branch. It gets us out of that silhouette mode and into more of a pretty realistic example of a branch. Next, I am going to show you how to do some basic water reflection on the water. So let's go ahead and rinse our number 4 round brush off and get some titanium white on our palette. We're going to start by just doing pure white colored water reflection lines. And we want to kind of think about perspective in this. So our water lines that are towards the bottom of the painting are going to be thicker, a bit wavy, and also longer, wider. But our water reflection lines that are going to be sort of like in the distance, they're going to start getting thinner, not as wide, and much closer together. So see how those are just kind of little small dash lines that are closer, more dense, not as large, not as thick. The ones on the bottom are further apart and longer. So you want to kind of think about that as you're painting your lines. So bigger lines towards the bottom, smaller in the back. And I'm not really going to fill up my entire blue area. I don't want to get rid of all the blue. So just a few lines in there. You can kind of decide when you want to stop with the lines. When our rock formation dries, we can actually paint a few waves kind of splashing on the rock, but we want to kind of let that dry before we start mixing white into that. It would get kind of messy. And maybe there's a few water lines behind our rock, behind tree branches, so you don't want to forget about those areas. So let's load our brush into some phthalo blue. I'm going to do some shadow, a little basic shadowing under some of these water reflection lines. So without rinsing the brush, just grab your dark blue color and paint right under some of the bigger lines, but you can do it under the lines that are kind of in the distance. And this is kind of blending with that white. So I'm just gently painting this darker blue just directly under the little wave lines to create some shadow in my water. So this should show up darker than that layer of paint below it. If it's not, you can add more blue or add just a tiny bit of black to it to get it to show up darker. This is just very thin dark blue line that just gently blends a little bit with that white and just under it. So let's just continue to paint this. We don't have to do this to all of the lines. In fact, I am not going to do that to all the lines. I'm going to do it to some of the ones that are kind of in the distance, but not all of them need a dark blue little shadow under it. And maybe there's some dark blue lines and they're not attached to any of the white lines. Maybe they're just dark reflection or water texture lines. But remember about perspective, they're kind of smaller in the distance. Some little dark lines. And they're bigger and wider towards the bottom of the water. I love to create sparkles in some of these water paintings. It really adds to the sort of whimsical, magical effect To do that, let's just this is that little detail brush that I showed you at the beginning. It's called a 3-0 round brush. You can use this, whatever smallest brush that you have available would work, or even a toothpick can work for this. And I'll show you what we can do with the toothpick here in a second. But right now, I'm just taking this little 3-0 round brush and I'm painting little dots in the water. And some of these are actually going to turn into little star sparkles. Some of them are just going to remain dots, but it just kind of adds to that glittery effect from the sun kind of reflecting on the water. Just little tiny dots just kind of scattered throughout. And then we can try this with our toothpick. So this, you can decide if you like this or not. You don't have to use the toothpick, but sometimes when we're just doing like a little, just dragging the white up and down to create a little diamond sort of sparkle. All it is just kind of dragging that paint, but that toothpick allows us to create that really tiny line detail. You can also try this with a white paint pen if you like to use the white paint pen. Or you can just use the little detail brush to paint the little sparkles. But it's basically just kind of dragging it up, and you want the end to really just kind of go to a point. So not all of the dots turned into little diamond sparkles, just some of them. And it just adds to that magical, whimsical look in the water. Next, let's rinse and let's do a sun, or at least the first layer of the sun. So I'm going to show you how to create this like really pretty bright glowing sun with sun rays coming out through the rock. But the first thing we need to do is actually create a sort of glow layer first for the sun. So on your palette, you want to mix yellow and white together. This should be brighter than that sky color. If it's not, add more white to it so that it shows up. So just take your round brush and paint a circle. If you're doing this with a partner, you can try having a sun being on only one canvas, or you can both paint a sun and have that circle split down the middle. You can kind of decide what you want to do about that. But see, I took my finger and kind of smeared it. So right now there's no definitive sun right there. It's just a glow. So then take your brush and load only white on it. Paint a little dot in there. Take your finger and kind of smear it. It should be brighter at this point. Take your white again. Paint a circle. You can smear it again with your finger. It's starting to get brighter and brighter. So this is our glow of our sun. And then when you're done creating the glow effect, you can take your brush again and do one final sort of circle on there and just kind of leave it alone. And that's going to be our sun. So we're just going to kind of leave that alone for now. Right now it does look like a sun. We have that glowing circle, but we're not going to do the rays until everything kind of dries. We're just going to let that set for a little bit. While that's drying, let's go ahead and do our blossoms. So I'm going to be using light pink and deep violet for this, and the number 4 round brush. So we're just going to paint these little dots of these blossoms, kind of like a wisteria tree. They're just kind of like hanging down in little vertical bundles. So I'm just doing very basic dots, dotting this. I almost decided to do this with Q-tips. So if you want to not ruin your round brush from all these dotting techniques, little dots, you can actually take a Q-tip. Like one Q-tip might work. You may even try 2 or 3 Q-tips bundled up together. It kind of creates that same effect with the dots, and you can just throw the Q-tip away when you're done. You're just using both the purple and the white to create these little bunches, vertical little columns of flowers. So they are a little bit wider at the top and then they go kind of narrow towards the bottom. So each little bundle has more little dots to begin with, and then it kind of goes down, and then it becomes less and less and just kind of tapers off. So in the top corner area, we have a lot of those little dots. So when I go to reload my brush, I'm grabbing basically different amounts of the pink and purple. So I want a variety of lights and darks. So some of the little columns, maybe it's just all dark purple. Some it's like an equal mix of pink and purple. Some it's just light pink. So just kind of creating that variety. And these are just columns of flower that just are kind of draped over the branches. Maybe this is a wisteria tree. Maybe it's a made-up tree in Fantasyland. We don't really know, but it's super pretty. I love how this purple looks against the sunset background. So for our tree on the right, it's basically same thing. Little columns of purple and pink dots that are just draping down over branches. Next, I am going to paint the little silhouette cattails on the very bottom of the painting. This is a detail you can decide if you want to skip, if you want to kind of simplify this painting and not do this, you are welcome to skip this. I am using a number 30, so that little detail brush, and the Mars Black to paint the little cattails. So it's a very basic little elongated oval shape with a little notch sticking out, and then it's attached to a little line for the stem. And we can just do several of them kind of going at different angles. And then you can do, so there's our little stem, and you can do leaves that are kind of curved downwards. The leaves are thicker at the bottom, and then they go to a point. And we can do the same thing on the other side. If you want to make them symmetrical, you can. You can also do a different number on one side than the other. You can create little bundles of grass just kind of sticking up from the bottom of the canvas. So I'm not going to do cattails all the way across the painting, but if you want to do more or more pieces of grass or other things, plants or a frog or something creative, you are definitely welcome to do that. If your cattails are not really showing up or there's not a whole lot of contrast down there because it's a dark background and we're doing black on dark, what you can do is actually highlight your silhouette a little bit. So I like to do this just to add a little pop of contrast. So I take my titanium white and just on one side, a little curved white highlight. And that's just enough to get those cattails to stand out a little bit better. I'm not going to do any highlighting on the leaves. So then I'm going to rinse and go back to my number 4 round brush. I am going to work on some of the waves that are in the background. I'm going to take my white and take some of that water and kind of make it go up and overlap a little bit of that rock, to kind of make it look like the waves are sort of crashing into that rock. And then we can even kind of drag our brush up, dry brush style. So that just means we're just kind of dragging that paint that's already there without adding more paint to the brush. It's very dry and kind of like scratchy, translucent. And that'll make it look like that water is kind of splashing up against that rock. So now the entire base of that rock formation is pretty much covered by white splash water lines. And let's do our sun rays next. If you don't want to do the sun rays, you don't have to. But this is what we're going to do. We're going to take that white, and I'm just going to go ahead and repaint that center of the circle. All I did was just repaint the sun. Solid coat of white circle. I'm going to wipe my brush off and drag it. So when we drag the paint that's there without loading paint on our brush, we want to do this very lightly. We're just quickly kind of dragging that paint outwards. We want it to kind of go to a point, so I'm dragging it. I'm kind of putting more pressure on my brush at first and then quickly releasing the pressure. You want to do this very, very lightly. I am letting the tip of that brush just barely skid the surface of that canvas. So I'm not pressing hard on it. That's enough to create this very soft, translucent line coming out from the sun. And it's going to overlap the rock formation to make it look like that sun is just shining through that heart. You may want to add just a teeny bit of white to your brush, especially if it's not dragging out as much anymore. So I just went back with another very, very light layer. And then when you're done with your sun rays, you can go back and you can repaint your sun again. So that circle, we lost our circle when we dragged a lot of that paint back outwards. So just go back and repaint your circle again. And then you have your really bright, glowing sun. I'm going to do a few final touch-ups to this painting, and one of them includes maybe adding some lighter layers to our rock formation with the white and the raw sienna. So just in some areas, maybe we have some bright highlights where it's just, the sun's just hitting that part, so it's kind of glowing and it's a little bit brighter. We don't want to lose the contrast of the rock formation. It's still mostly dark. Ooh, there's just a few layers of lighter color in there. Maybe we want more blossoms. So I'm just going to go back with my purple and pink. Maybe add more blossoms in there. And that is the conclusion of how to paint Lover's Cove. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.